Welcome to the PinkpillRx podcast, hosted by Katie and Jay Fillmore, where we navigate complex and thought-provoking topics surrounding women with a focus on education. For shorter form content, follow us on TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube at Caters88 or PinkpillRx.
That's KATORS88.
If you enjoy this podcast, please give us a follow and maybe a nice review.
We're back, Jack.
We're back, Jack!
Season 2, Pink Pill.
We got some goodies. I'm not going to spoil it.
This month of October, we're doing a theme, and it is a haunted theme, a haunted history theme. So we're going to be talking about some of the haunted history when it comes to women, women's health, women's experiences, and even do like a little Twilight Zone episode about alternate timelines, if things would have played out a little differently. So we got some stuff in store.
I love the imagination. The alternate timelines one is going to be one of my favorites. I can already tell.
Yeah. Well, you'll have to wait for that one.
Yeah.
Because
Me
today we're talking about hysteria.
Ah!
You know, it's funny. We laugh about it, but I do want to say that as we talk about these stories and this information, I want you to keep in mind that this is about suppressing women. And it has implications today, even though that's something that happened, 100 years ago, 200 years ago. Like, it has implications today because stereotypes have a long lifespan, even after they die out over time. So hysteria isn't a diagnostic name for anything anymore. They've divided it up into something else, which we'll talk about later. But that a deeply rooted stereotype, so like women's sexuality, women's mental health back then, a deeply rooted stereotype has a total lifespan about 200 and 300 years after it's formally ended before it actually stops covertly affecting culture.
Wow. It's a really long half-life.
It is a very long half-life.
Wow.
So when we're talking about this, just keep in mind that this still trickles into thoughts towards women today.
Okay.
I mean, it has to, because a lot of this stuff is stereotyping, and a lot of this stuff is in efforts to silence women.
Oh, well, I mean, you hear rhetoric, people talk about how women are over-emotional. I wouldn't want a female president because I want her to have her finger on the red button.
Right.
Type thing,
Yes.
And that's probably remnants of hysteria.
It totally is remnants of hysteria.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So
that's a great example.
It could even be currently affecting the electability of female candidates.
It totally could be. So
Yeah.
we have talked about hysteria on TikTok, just talked about it. We haven't really done a full deep dive podcast on it before, so we're going to do that today. So some of this stuff, it's not going to be shocking to you. It's not going to be all new information for you per se, but I would love to be able to just ping pong off of each other and discuss it.
Absolutely.
So hysteria literally means suffering in the uterus. It was a catch-all diagnosis for anything a doctor thought was wrong with a woman.
Oh.
It was also considered in some points in time in history a demonic condition. It could be associated with sorcery. And it very much went with the wandering womb theory, which persisted for centuries, which was the womb wandered throughout the body and caused issues. And so it needed to be coaxed back into the correct position.
It's so superstitious, a lot of this stuff.
All women's issues back then were related often to their reproductive organs in the minds of the medical community.
Yeah. Because a woman couldn't have a condition that's a man could also have?
Well, it's because women weren't fulfilling their quote unquote God-given roles necessarily. So if you weren't being submissive, or if you weren't even tempered, if you had a temper, or if you were sexually inhibited, those were the things that were pathologized and you were considered hysterical. So some additional reasons women would be diagnosed: women with chronic pain, women who had fainting issues, seizures, IBS, ulcers, malnutrition, appetite changes, sadness, grief, depression, anxiety, loss of virginity outside of marriage, lack of interest in sex, but not too much interest in sex because excessive libido made you hysterical too, infertility, irregular menstruation, postpartum struggles, masturbation, anger, irritability, being outspoken, being argumentative, refusing marriage, refusing motherhood, stubbornness, seeking a divorce, independence, challenging male authority, menopause, and restlessness were all conditions considered diagnosable with hysteria.
What the heck? So, okay, if you were diagnosed with hysteria?
Sure, yes.
Okay, let's say you're experiencing grief for whatever reason and you're diagnosed with hysteria. What would they then do to you?
Oh, you could end up in a insane asylum.
Really?
Like Mary Todd Lincoln did when she was grieving her husband.
Is that Abraham Lincoln's wife?
Yeah.
She got sent to an institution
For hysteria,
for grieving her husband's death?
because she was showing a lot of grief for her husband.
Really? That's nuts. So you were in danger if you exhibited any of those things.
Yeah.
So what would you do then if you were sad? Just not show it?
You had to
pretend?
You had to be even tempered. Yeah. You had to suppress and not express.
Okay, so obviously if you're married, your husband has enormous power over you.
Oh, yeah, because husbands would often be the ones that went to the insane asylums and said, hey, my wife has hysteria. Can you please admit her?
Would dads do that for their...
Dads would do that too. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves.
Okay.
So I don't want to get too ahead of
Sure.
ourselves. So in 1637, this was around for a long time. So in 1637, the theory was that when sexual fluids were not released, the heart and surrounding areas are enveloped in a morbid and moist exudation, and you needed to purge the offending fluids. So whatever was backed up, the seed, the blood, you needed to purge that, okay?
Okay.
And we needed to get that womb back in its place.
This is very unscientific method.
So some of the remedies was marriage. That was the biggest general recommendation, that was going to fix the woman. And in fact, male semen was also believed to have healing properties.
Right.
So intercourse was served multiple purposes for the woman. Not just conception, but, he could heal her.
Okay.
Pregnancy was also a remedy. And then a clitorectomy was performed on women for hysteria.
Is that what it sounds like?
That is exactly what it sounds like.
Oh my.
It is the surgical removal, partial or total, of the clitoris.
Oh, that.
So the rationale in the 19th century, doctors believed the clitoris was the seat of female sexual desire and nervous agitation. So by removing it, they argued it would stop masturbation, nymphomania, and symptoms of hysteria, such as anxiety, depression, irritability, and seizures. Marion Sims and Isaac Baker Brown in Victorian England, they were gynecologists.
Air quotes.
Yeah, I'm air quoting it because they were awful people. But they advocated for clitorectomies as treatment for hysteria, epilepsy, and even unwifely conduct.
Oh my God.
So it was a surgical method they usually performed without anesthesia. In the mid-1800s.
No, just... The sheer amount of nerve endings and no anesthesia.
Correct.
You can keep going. I'm going to be stuck on that.
Well, we got to remember, Marion Sims experimented on slaves without anesthesia all the time.
Oh, she was the one.
It wasn't she, it's a him.
Oh. Got it. I was thinking Mary Ann Sims.
No, Marion.
Oh my gosh. And did you talk about him with me before?
Yeah, we've talked about him, and
on
he
an episode,
did awful experiments on enslaved women.
Right, no anesthesia.
Without anesthesia, did it for years and years and years. And then when he put actually these things that he learned into practice, of course, the white women who he operated on often got anesthesia at that point.
Oh, God.
But the clitorectomies were happening before then. Chloroform was new and not universally used. So a scalpel or scissors was used to excise the clitoris. And there was obviously no post-op antibiotics. There was crude sutures and a huge risk for infection or hemorrhage or sepsis. Women rarely ever consented to this. Fathers or husbands are who authorized it, especially if a woman was suspected of masturbation or promiscuity.
This is such cruelty. Inhumane treatment.
Masturbation was widely believed to cause hysteria, insanity, infertility, and moral decline. So you think about that. They really truly believed that to the point of where they would remove a woman's clitoris for this.
Yeah.
And think about how long it takes for stereotypes and for biases to die out.
Oh, okay.
And how things like this still affect women's sexuality.
Oh, yeah.
Excessive sexual desire in women was considered a medical pathology and not a normal human trait.
Isn't it still widely considered like a less appropriate trait?
Yes, it is. And there's that, yes.
Yeah, whereas men, it's just like, oh, it's just guys.
Right.
But for a woman, then you're like, not ostracized, but you're like
there's something wrong with you
Yeah.
if you have a higher sexual desire, especially if your desire is higher than your partner's.
Oh, yeah.
Who is if in a
male
heteronormative relationship, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so doctors cast hysteria as a disease of the nervous system, and it was overstimulated by the clitoris, so they had to cut it out. By the 1870s, Baker Brown was expelled, thank God, from the Obstetrical Society of London because colleagues viewed clitorectomies as extreme and unscientific.
Good. Thank God other people didn't agree.
Still, the procedure lingered on in pockets of Western medicine into the early 20th century. In the U.S., medical textbooks as late as the 1940s discussed clitorectomies as a treatment option for neurotic or difficult women.
Oh, God, that's so recent.
1940.
Yeah. I can't believe that. I mean, I guess I can.
Well, in the 19th century and before that, but in the 19th century especially, women's independence was madness. Assertive, ambitious women were unnatural and sick. And like I said, women's natures are linked highly to the reproductive organs. Still are, right? You have Trump that's quoted as saying, what was it? It was Megyn Kelly, the Fox News anchor. This was back, I don't know, was it 2020? Or 2016, I can't remember, but he was talking about how she had blood coming out of her eyes, blood coming out of you nowhere, or something like that was the quote, right?
I remember that.
Because she was leaning into him because of the comments I made about women being pigs or dogs or something like that. It was something like that. It was during the debate, and he was, so that's what he said about her.
Gosh. Well, yeah, because, you get backed in a corner, you have to do an ad hominem attack. Because you can't refute the actual premise they're talking about. And then he just went after her as her gender.
Yeah, define an ad hominem attack for people.
Yeah, so it's when you attack the person giving the argument instead of attacking the argument itself. So if someone gives a good argument and you don't have a rebuttal, you can oftentimes just decide to attack the credibility of the person by saying, oh, you know what? You're X, Y, or Z, instead of actually addressing the words that they're saying.
Right.
I think it's a Latin term.
So assertive women were dispatched to asylums and accused of being the greatest annoyance to the family for defying domestic control. A husband often arranged for the committal of their wife simply for the reason that the husband requested it. It took less evidence of insanity if the husband could just request it and he didn't really have to prove that she was insane.
You could just basically, hey, just say a few observations.
Yeah, his word was enough. His word was enough.
Yeah. Dang.
And then she had to defend her sanity. Now, how hard is that when part of this criteria of diagnosis is being an unruly woman, being an outspoken woman, being an independent woman, and now you have to defend your sanity? How are you going to do that without being an outspoken woman?
Yeah. Oh, gosh. That sounds like an impossible task to try and do. Or at least, I don't know, the amount of you have to act absolutely precise in your life to not get, to not have this be the potential of what's going to happen to you because a guy that has quote unquote authority in your life just tires of you. Dude wants to has an affair, wants to get married to her. Well, you're going to commit your current wife.
Oh, I bet you that happened all the time.
Yeah.
Like I was saying, that independence was viewed as insanity. Mm-hmm. One doctor in 1858 is recorded as saying, after visiting an all-girls school, you seem to be training your girls for the lunatic asylum. Because women who studied and read or had minds of their own were demonstrating eccentricity of conduct, which meant they were morally insane, which was a diagnosis actually invented in 1835. And they would be locked away until they conformed to a more feminine behavior.
Dang. So just because a woman wanted to become educated.
Just because a woman wanted to become educated.
What a prison.
Here's some examples of some notable women that experienced being locked up for hysteria, often by their husbands or family members that committed them. Elizabeth Packard was a housewife admitted for hysteria by her husband due to stubbornness in 1860. She had 6 kids, and she was standing up to her domineering husband. He was a pastor, and she was challenging his theology. To the point of going to another church at one point.
Oh, I heard about her.
So in defense of her sanity, she wrote, I, although a woman, have just as good as right to my opinion as my husband has to his. But what a double bind for her to be in, because even by her saying that, she's almost proving her own insanity by definition.
Exactly.
So it's this double bind by defending your sanity and saying something like, you are defying the traditional female roles, therefore are hysterical.
Yeah.
She spent 3 years admitted until she finally won her legal battle.
Oh my gosh. 3 years. You know what? A lot of credit to her for not recanting.
Yeah. And then you got, like I said, Mary Todd Lincoln, wife of Abraham Lincoln.
That's wild to me.
After his assassination, Mary Todd spiraled into grief, paranoia, and erratic behavior. In 1875, her only surviving son, Robert, had her tried for insanity. At the trial, doctors testified that she was hysterical and unfit to manage her own affairs, aka her inheritance and her land and her money. She was committed. It was a private asylum for wealthy women. And Mary was eventually released after less than a year, largely due to her lobbying and support from women's rights activists.
Yeah.
Still, the damage stuck and her reputation was permanently marred as the hysterical widow, and she largely did not have access to her inheritance. Now, I don't know, when you're researching this and reading about this stuff, you don't know what lens it's being written through. So there are rumors of her having spent a lot of money, and that being a legitimate concern that she was quote unquote wasting her inheritance. And she was, I know after the part of the paranoia was because after her husband was killed, she was paranoid that someone was trying to poison her, which I don't blame her. And was paranoid that her son was sick when he really wasn't. So that was part of the paranoia that got her admitted.
PTSD.
Yeah, she was permanently marred as the hysterical widow though. Okay, so this is the story about Jean Martine Charcot, I believe.
Or Charcot.
Or Charcot, possibly. And I apologize if you are from France because I've really messed that up.
My grandparents rolling in their grave.
Yeah,
French was their first language.
Yes.
And they're just rolling in their grave.
Charcot was a celebrity neurologist who worked at this famous asylum, and I can't even say the asylum's name, and I'm sorry, where thousands of women, mostly poor, marginalized, or deemed socially deviant, were institutionalized. He turned hysterical women into case studies and live performances. So he had theatrical lessons. He held weekly public lectures where women diagnosed with hysteria were brought on stage, sometimes hypnotized, and their seizures or fits were displayed before audiences or doctors, journalists, and even artists.
He's capitalizing on their medical conditions.
Yes. The most famous patient was named Augustine, and she was admitted at 15 years old after running away from an abusive household. She became a kind of poster child for hysteria. She was photographed, sketched, and exhibited, and her image was circulated widely, shaping how society visualized women's madness.
Poor girl.
Women often resisted, obviously, and Augustine eventually escaped the asylum disguised as a man. But the institution's practices cemented the idea that women's bodies were inherently unstable, sexualized, and medically pathological. So he essentially turned hysteria into a scientific performance where women's suffering became entertainment for elite men.
It kind of reminds me of the circus.
Yeah, it is very similar to that.
Yeah.
Another notable figure when it comes to hysteria, her name is Zelda Fitzgerald.
I've heard of her.
Oh, maybe because she's the wife of F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Yeah. He's an author, right?
Yeah. Have you heard any rumors about her own work at all?
No, I just know her name.
Okay. So she was diagnosed with schizophrenia and hysteria, institutionalized for years, and her ambition to become a writer and dancer was often reframed as mental illness. It was because it was in the 1930s to 40s. It's a more modern example of how women's creativity and defiance of roles were pathologized.
Okay.
Scholars have pointed out that whole passages of her letters and journals appear almost verbatim in Scott's novels, especially This Side of Paradise and The Beautiful and Damned. When Zelda published Save Me the Waltz, Scott was furious, and he claimed she was stealing material he intended for his work Tender as the Night, and he pressured publishers and doctors to suppress her writing, arguing she was unstable.
Whoa.
Their conflicts over authorship bled directly into Zelda's psychiatric treatment, where her creativity was reframed as a symptom of overstrain and hysteria. Doctors described Zelda as suffering from schizophrenia or hysteria, but many of her so-called symptoms overlapped with frustration at confinement and creative suppression.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet.
So her talent with writing, and I truly think it's because her husband felt threatened, and also plagiarized some of her work,
Yeah.
was instead pathologized instead of respected.
Jeez. What a torturous existence.
It was often used in law to seize women's property or autonomy, which you can see with Mary Todd Lincoln.
Yeah.
In medicine, to display and dissect women's suffering, which we see with Augustine. In religion, to purge deviance, Salem witch trials would be an example of that.
Yeah.
And in culture, to punish ambition, which we can see with Zelda Fitzgerald. And of course, hysteria was only a woman's disease.
Right. Yeah, I've never heard of it associated with the male.
Freud decided to take hysteria a step further and wrote a bunch of studies on hysteria. And he said it's a result of a psychological scar produced by trauma repression. Sounds pretty.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Go on.
Specifically, the psychological damage was due to removing male sexuality from females, in which a young female realizes she doesn't have a penis anymore.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
And as a result, she is hit with the reality she has been castrated in the womb and has become female.
Oh, my God. I remember learning briefly about that in college in my psychology. I just took one psychology class. What's interesting is biologically it's actually reversed because all fetuses start as female. So that's okay.
But he felt that they were unable to reconcile the loss of their metaphorical male member. And with this in mind, Freud described hysteria as characteristically female and recommended women get married and have sex. The idea was that the woman could regain her lost male member by marrying one and eventually giving birth to one. But if marriage wasn't possible or permissible for some reason, or there was no prospects, what were they going to do?
I don't know.
Or if you had a prolapsed uterus or any other gynecological disorder, and you couldn't have sex to cure it by the healing power of male semen.
Right. What are you going to do
What would a young or unmarried woman do? Or widows or nuns? Doctors were often employed to release these pent-up fluids and coax the womb into its proper spot.
Okay.
By stimulating the female organs into a fit, quotations.
Okay.
And that would benefit the patient.
Okay.
AKA, it was uterine massage. It was basically bimanual, one hand outside the body on the abdomen and the other inside the vagina until spasms occurred, AKA or orgasm.
Right. And we all know what a fit is here.
Yes. So these sessions were considered long and very physically exhausting for these doctors. And its sexual nature wasn't acknowledged. And in fact, there was a fear of it being interpreted that way. So many clinicians advocated for causing patients pain during this procedure too. So they wouldn't be accused of just pleasuring someone. Eventually, vibrators were invented for this purpose.
Oh, it was a medical device.
It was a medical device.
Got it. Well, how about that?
To help with hysteria and to induce fits. It really rose in popularity during the 17th century, and then by 1910, it fell out of popularity. Yeah, so we're hundreds of years here
Yeah.
of these practices.
You said 17th century?
Yeah, those are lifetimes. I mean, how many
300 years.
lifetimes of people lived, and that's a great example of something falling out of popularity at 300 years, right?
Yeah.
It took 300 years for it to fall out of popularity.
Yeah.
And here's something that I dove into a little bit because I had a inkling that if you got admitted to insane asylums, it's notoriously hard to get out. I knew that. But how long were these stays if you got admitted for
hysteria?
Hysteria.
How
Just
long were
think
they?
about you having anxiety and you
Yeah.
got admitted because you had anxiety or you were grieving
Yeah.
the death of the assassination of your husband. Okay. So the U.S. stats for hysteria in 1800 showed an average of 3 to 5 years before someone died or was declared chronic and moved to poorhouses. In the UK, though, many women stayed 5 to 20 years, with some never being discharged. Man. You often died there.
Your life's just over if you get admitted then.
Yeah, because hysteria was largely considered incurable. There was treatment such as fits, but ultimately it was considered something that was more uncurable unless women suddenly started to obey, got married, or mellowed with age.
So you're captive.
Yeah. Wealthier women would sometimes have it a little bit better. They would get something called the rest cure, which was weeks to months of isolation, bed rest, and forced idleness. Charlotte Perkins Gilman's Yellow Wallpaper is a classic case of this. Unfortunately, though, this was not an option for working class or unwanted wives or daughters. But in the 1880s, Gilman suffered severe postpartum depression after the birth of her daughter. Instead of support, she was prescribed this infamous rest cure. And what it was absolute bed rest, total isolation, no reading, no writing, no art, no intellectual activity.
Just laying there.
Just laying
Your
there.
brain turning to mush.
The theory was women's nerves were overstimulated by modern life, and enforced idleness and domesticity would heal them. So the reality was it broke women down further.
Well, yeah.
And Gilman later said it nearly drove her insane.
I bet. Oh, I bet. It's like, yeah, you're isolated and you can't do it. What do you just lay there?
Gilman followed this doctor's orders for a few months, stopped writing, limited herself to 2 hours of intellectual life a day, never touched a pen again except at his instruction. She deteriorated so badly that she later wrote, "I came so near the borderline of utter mental ruin." She abandoned the treatment, left her husband, and began writing again.
Good for her.
Yep. And out of that trauma came her most famous short story, a fictionalized account of a woman's locked up in a room under the rest cure who descends into madness, obsessing over the wallpaper. It's one of the earliest feminist critiques of psychiatry, exposing how medicine trapped women rather than healing them.
Wow. I would be interested in reading that story.
She became a public intellectual, feminist, and lecturer advocating economic independence for women. She published Women in Economics in 1898, arguing that women's subordination was economic, not natural. She said she wrote the Yellow Wallpaper to warn others and even sent a copy to the doctor who treated her. His name was Dr. Mitchell, in hopes of changing his practice.
Oh, good for her for doing that too. Jeez.
Oh, something else that was interesting about the asylums. I'm sorry, I'm circling back. I forgot to say this, that women were kept for about 658 days longer than men for the same uncurable disease. Like, it wasn't like the same disease as in like hysteria, but other diseases that were considered uncurable, like hysteria,
Yeah.
women would see 658 days longer stay.
So 2 years.
Yeah. And that was according to statistics from the Freud's Asylum in Philadelphia, which was open from 1817 to 1885. But hysteria was studied as a psychiatric disorder in the DSM until 1980.
Oh, that feels very wrong and grotesque.
Yeah, but you know what? In the 1980s, they said, you know what? Hysteria, that's got to go. Instead, we're going to divide this up into 3 different disorders.
Oh, what are they?
Somatic symptom disorder, which is unexplained physical complaints like pain, fatigue, and GI issues. Conversion disorder, which are neurological symptoms without organic cause, such as seizures, paralysis, and blindness. And borderline personality disorder absorbed many unfeminine traits formerly coded as hysteria, like emotional intensity, self-harm, unstable identity, etc. So I'm going to do a comparison chart here for you guys. So you have the old traits of hysteria, so unexplained fainting, seizures, paralysis, blindness.
Okay.
Modern label is conversion disorder. Gendered patterns in this, women are 2 to 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with this. 70% of diagnosed patients are female.
Okay.
Chronic pain, fatigue, GI problems without a clear cause would be considered hysteria back then. Now we call it somatic symptom disorder. Women are 10 times more likely to receive this diagnosis than men are. Emotional volatility, too much anger, fear of abandonment, self-harm would have been hysteria. Today, it's borderline personality disorder. And about 75% of borderline personality disorder diagnoses go to women.
Whoa, that's nuts.
Nervousness, restlessness, wandering womb symptoms would have been hysteria. Today, they'd be considered anxiety disorders, such as panic, generalized anxiety. Women are 2 times more likely to be diagnosed with this than men are.
Oh, yeah. How many times? I mean, I don't know if you want to include this or not, but you were misdiagnosed with generalized anxiety versus ADHD for years.
Yeah, 10 years.
Yeah.
Postpartum depression, unfit mothers would be hysteria. Now they're perinatal mood disorders, but they're still severely underdiagnosed, often mislabeled as adjustment issues. So women aren't getting the help they need.
Yeah.
Defiance, refusing domestic roles, intellectual ambitions would have been hysteria. Now they're personality disorders such as borderline and histrionic. Histrionic personality disorder is basically hysteria 2.0, and women diagnosed at 4 times higher rate than men are of this. The last one would be medically unexplained symptoms. So just like an umbrella, right?
Okay.
Some diagnoses today could fall under functional neurological disorder, fibromyalgia, IBS, CFS, and women overwhelmingly are labeled with these. And women's issues are often dismissed as psychosomatic too under this umbrella.
Yeah, that is true.
So it's the same ghost, new mask. Boo. Hysteria didn't die. It just fractured into these multiple modern categories that women are still disproportionately diagnosed with.
Huh.
I mean, the gender skew is glaring. These are not women-only problems, but they sure seem to
be
diagnosed way more.
I wonder the men who would fit the criteria, this like a male who's experiencing the same symptoms but is not labeled as one of these things, what is he then labeled as?
And the thing is, the fact that we focused for hundreds and hundreds of years of this whole wandering womb theory and this hysteria stuff, it set back women's research so much because we weren't researching women. We were researching men because we had women figured out. So men got the medical research, especially when it comes to reproductive health.
Yeah.
1/3 of women will be diagnosed with a psych condition throughout their lifetime compared to 2 in 10 men for the same presenting symptoms.
Whoa, say that again.
1/3 of women who present with symptoms that are the same as men's symptoms will be diagnosed with a psych condition compared to 2 in 10 men.
Yeah, that's a sizable difference. That's like 20% versus 33%.
There was a study, and I'll end with this. This was interesting. This was a study that was done. And before I get too much into it, I do want to mention that a lot of times your anxiety and depression is managed by your PCP. Unless you go and see a psychiatrist, it's just managed by your general doctor. Your general doctor is usually the first one to prescribe like an SSRI or something like that. But they did a study of 840 patients, and these were the diagnoses of these patients based on their family doctor's diagnosis, their PCP. Okay. Major depressive disorder, bipolar, anxiety disorder, social anxiety disorder, and panic disorder. These were the diagnoses of the 840 patients. They were varied. Yeah. Like they didn't all have all of these, but okay. The ultimate misdiagnosis rate. Okay. Meaning that they were diagnosed as this, but they did not actually meet the DSM criteria to be diagnosed and treated for this. Okay. Major depressive disorder, 65.9%.
Shoot, not surprised, but that is super high.
Generalized anxiety disorder, 71%.
Yeah, dang.
Bipolar disorder, 92.7%. Panic disorder, 85.8%. Social anxiety disorder, 97.8%.
Oh my gosh.
Those people did not actually meet the criteria, but were diagnosed by their PCP.
Well, shoot.
Effects of hysteria, And the stereotypes of women's mental health and reproduction and sexuality still bleeds through today. And it's haunting.
Yeah.
Literally. It haunts women, follows them around.
Dang. If I was a woman and I didn't have a female PCP or female psychiatrist or whatever, I would be looking
Yeah.
to switch.
Yeah. Well, that's all we got for today.
That was scary stuff.
It was. It is. It is.
Yeah.
I hope for those of you listening, something was intriguing or sparked a curiosity, or you felt affirmed or challenged. Stay educated. Take the pink pill. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give us a follow and maybe a nice review.